Good afternoon. So as we get closer to the end of the year, we begin thinking about using up the last of our vacation days, spending time with friends and family, and big holiday dinners. Today I'm going to share with you my story of the first time I tried to make a big Thanksgiving dinner. In the week before Thanksgiving, I came up with a list of recipes I thought looked interesting. I made a rough estimation of how much time I'd need to cook everything. I came up with a grocery list and I hit the store. When it was time to start cooking, I launched into cook mode and I was like peeling and chopping and doing all the cooking things. And after several long hours, I took a step back and surveyed my handiwork. Before me was a battlefield of dirty dishes and disappointment. What happened? What happened? Well, I tried to make a little bit of progress in each of the steps, but as I got further along into each of the recipes, I was just overwhelmed by the barrage of steps. If I had just taken some time beforehand to prepare my ingredients, consolidate similar steps, and plan out my use of the stove and oven, things would have probably turned out a lot better. In a lot of ways, data analysis is a lot like making a big Thanksgiving dinner. If you just take time beforehand to explore your data set, reconcile any outliers, and reshape your data to best suit your analysis needs, you have a better chance of staying in your analytic flow and deriving real analytic value. Hello, my name is Issa Beacon, and today I'll be talking about Tableau Prep Builder, a powerful tool to help you clean, combine, and reshape your data. Let's get started. So a little bit about me. My educational background is in electrical engineering, computer science, and math. Before I came to Tableau, I worked at a company that designs and manufactures RFID technology, so RFID readers and the little chips in your badges. Suffice to say, I'm accustomed to working with millions and billions of rows of data, so I'm a perfect fit for Tableau. And since I've been at Tableau for about 5 years, I've worked on the big data, data prep, Tableau Prep Builder, Tableau Prep Conductor, and data catalog teams. And one silly thing about me, when I'm not hard at work on your features, I like to unwind by playing foosball. I always thought I was pretty good, but some of my colleagues who have played on my teams decided to help me see and understand why that not be the case. And it turns out I might not have any idea what I'm doing. All right. Cool things about you, not to put you on the spot, but you're here. You picked the best talk at Tableau conference, so it will help you for today's talk if you know about joins and unions, pivots and aggregates, but this is just an introductory talk, so don't be overwhelmed by anything you see. Come see us in the data village if any of these operations are interesting to you. We'll walk you through what they mean and what they do, but I'll try and give you some basic definitions. And bonus points if you can relate to the agony of preparing holiday meals. Cool. So we covered the about me. I'll give you a high-level overview of what Tableau Prep is and where it fits in the data analysis ecosystem. And then we'll go through some different stages you might experience when using the application. So exploring, cleaning, integrating would be joins and unions. Shaping your data would be pivots and aggregates. Sharing your data, so just outputting it to either a local file or to your server. And then some resources if you want to learn more. All right, Tableau Prep. While Tableau has been around helping people see and understand their data, that's not the whole story to data analysis. A lot of times people need to prepare their data. Some studies show that analysts spend as much as 80% of their time preparing their data and only 20% of their time analyzing it. While Tableau does provide tools for pivoting and other like data cleaning tools, it's primarily a data analysis product. And so here at Tableau, we saw an opportunity to bring the innovative Tableau feel to data preparation. And thus, Tableau Prep was born. Tableau Prep helps people clean, combine, and reshape their data. And I'm going to show you the user interface real quick so we can have a common feel for the product before I actually dig into my data set, which happens to be Thanksgiving recipes. We're still far enough from Thanksgiving that I might be able to salvage this one. All right. So this is the start screen when you open the product. Quick show of hands, how many of you have used Tableau Desktop? Awesome. Okay, so this might look pretty familiar to some of you, all of you. On the right, you have the Discover pane, which has more learning resources and interesting links. In the center area, you have like your recently opened flows and sample flows in case you just want to see how complex Prep Builder can get. And then on the left, you have that similar kind of connection pane with a bunch of local files, databases, whatever you want. We're just going to look at this sample flow. And the first thing you see here is this flow pane. The flow pane is a canvas, much like Tableau Desktop, where you interact with your data visually and build your flow. In Prep Builder, preparing your data is done by creating a flow made up of different steps like, so this is an input step, this is a cleaning step, this is a union and a join, and we have aggregations, pivots, and outputs. Last one. This one is an output step. So that's where you either publish to server or just local files, or more recently to databases. If we click on one of these steps, so the input step, you see the input pane. So this is the first step. Whenever you create a flow, you bring in some data, and right away you see all the fields in your data, so make sure that's all there. With their field types as well, and some sample values. On the input step, you also have some options to configure how you're bringing in your data, so data sampling as well as input unions, and we'll talk about both of those in a sec. If I click on the next step, a cleaning step in this case, the first thing you see is this profile pane. It's too zoomed in, but this central profile pane, which has all your fields again and kind of a high-level summary for each field. Using the profile pane, you can quickly see related values between fields by clicking one of the summary bars. It will highlight that bar as well as all the related values in the remaining fields, showing the relationship distribution between the remaining fields. Related values. If you have a field with discrete data and it's too large to be displayed on one card, we'll provide this visual scroll bar, which is totally not a mini-map, and you can use that to quickly explore your data as well. For each field, you can click this drop-down menu to see the available cleaning operations or other operations depending on the step. And lastly, below the profile pane, the center area, you have the data grid. Whoops. And the data grid shows the raw values at any point in your flow, so you can just see, instead of a high-level summary, you can actually see, well, this is my data, and get a feel for either what you have selected or just what's in your data. And finally, let's say you make a lot of changes, you're cleaning up your data, and you're not sure what you did. We also provide this changes pane here, which lists all the changes you've made on that step, so you can know what changes you made, edit them, or even reorder them as it suits you, or remove them if necessary. Last thing is one of my favorite features about Tableau Prep. A lot of you have used Tableau Desktop, but you might not be familiar with Prep. At any step in your flow, you can right-click and select Preview in Tableau Desktop. It'll pull the data at that exact step out and open an instance of Tableau Desktop for you to just play around with the data real quick. So if you're not quite sure how things are going, just preview in Tableau Desktop. It's not supposed to be the end of your analysis or the end of your data preparation, just a quick check-in for how things are going. All right. So we covered the connections pane, which is similar to Tableau Desktop. The flow pane was that canvas with the steps at the top. The profile pane had the high-level summary. The data grid was at the bottom. It had the raw values, kind of like a spreadsheet view. The changes pane showed all the changes that I had made on a given step, and preview in Tableau Desktop, which is awesome. One pitfall is that people get really into kind of exploring their data with Tableau Prep, and sometimes they get a little bit too into it. Tableau Prep is primarily about data preparation. Save the analysis for Tableau Desktop. It's my recommendation. All right, so the different stages of preparing your data. So I went online and I went to a bunch of recipe websites and I collected different recipes I found So I have one directory full of meal recipes, one directory full of desserts, because desserts are awesome, and one file with just the ratings for all the recipes on all the websites. I'm going to start out by connecting to my data, much like I would in Tableau. Oops. And so here's where I have everything. I'm going to go to the meal recipes, just select one at random, and right away, we are on the input step. So I'm looking at these fields. These look pretty good. I've got my recipe title. Looks like I've got some food facts, some allergens. I know a friend of mine has peanut allergy, so we'll have to make sure we don't include any recipes with peanuts. So that all looks good. What else? So the configuration options I talked about earlier. You might have noticed that I had a lot of recipe files in that directory. I want to bring those all in, but I don't want to create a bunch of input steps. Prep Builder offers you the option to create an input union, which you specify a regular expression to match against the files in a directory or subdirectories, and you can just pull in a bunch of related files at the same time. So I'm going to do that by selecting wildcard union, and by default it includes all the files in the same directory, and it looks like I do want these recipe files, but not this readme.txt, so I'm going to write a pattern that says star.csv. That means it has to end in a CSV suffix. And I click apply. Before I click apply, the input step just has the icon for a single file. And after I click apply, note that it's changed to include a plus sign. This means an input union is being performed and this input step contains multiple files. All right, that looks good. Got a lot of data. One last thing on the input step is data sampling. So the number of recipes I'll bring in aren't big enough to transfer data or to trigger data sampling, but to maintain peak performance, especially for large data sets, Tableau Prep will actually sample your data, and as you're building your flow, you'll just build it with a sample of your data instead of billions of rows. When you finally run the flow after you're done building a good cleaning flow, it'll run against the entire data set. But this is mainly to help you build a flow quickly. If you don't want data sampling, if you think you need to see all your values and you're willing to take a performance hit, then you can just disable it on this pane or configure it as you wish. Cool. I'm going to continue by just adding a cleaning step. And the cleaning step is just a basic step that allows you to see the state of your data and perform a variety of cleaning operations. But right now we're still just exploring. So first thing I want to note is on any step after the input step, you have a summary in the upper left-hand corner of the profile pane. This shows you how many fields and how many rows you have at that point. So if I did some aggregations, if I removed or excluded some rows, that might change things, and it gives you a feel for if you've lost rows somewhere along the way. That's useful. So I'm kind of concerned here. I'm looking at recipe titles, and I know I'm at the start of the list, but I don't see any turkey recipes. I want to make sure there's some turkey recipes, because that's kind of the point of Thanksgiving. To find a given value in a field, you just click the search, type in turkey, and it looks like we have 17 turkey recipes. Awesome. I also kind of want to get a feel for how complex these recipes are, and I know there's a complexity field. So I'm going to go over here. I found complexity, and I kind of want to sort out the complexity and see what's the hardest recipes. So there's this sort option here, and if I click it, it doesn't quite order by complexity. There's like 2.9, 2.5, 4.9. This is the first gotcha I want to tell you about. There's two ways to sort in Prep Builder. One is by frequency, so 3.7 is the most common value, but that's not how I want to sort. The other sort is by domain value, so ranking it, and that's what I want to do. So I click this drop down, select Z to A, sort by domain, and now we can see a domain sorting. If I click on the 5-star complexity recipes, I can see that the hardest recipes are turkey roulade, I'm saying that wrong, spice rub turkey, and skillet cornbread, which I'm pretty sure isn't that hard, but what do I know? Okay, cool. 2 sorts in Builder. Let's switch back. Yeah, another gotcha is that sometimes when you're exploring your data, you really expect to see, I don't know, like turkey recipes and they don't show up. That might be because sampling is enabled and we just didn't sample the right things. If that's happening, just disable sampling, see if you see your expected values because that could be the cause. And the other gotcha was there's 2 ways to sort in Prep Builder, so make sure you understand which sorting option you've chosen. All right, best part, cleaning your data. So you clean your data by applying cleaning operations such as filtering, renaming, splitting, grouping, and removing fields. Let's start off by getting rid of any recipes with peanuts in them. So I found my allergens field over here. I'm going to search with anything that says peanut. Cool, looks like there's 11 different categories. I'm just going to select all of them. And I'm going to right-click and exclude. If you'll remember, beforehand we had 161 rows, but now we only have 131. That means there were about 30 recipes that had peanuts in them. Cool. And if we wanted to undo that change for whatever reason or change peanuts to dairy or eggs or soy, in the changes pane we could just edit that change right here and it would be awesome. All right. So as you're cleaning your data, especially when you just start off with Prep Builder, you might not know all the different cleaning operations that are available to you. You might not know what you want to do. Prep Builder actually looks over your data and comes up with some recommendations for you, which is what this is telling me right here. There's 2 recommendations for changes that I might want to perform on my data. If I look at them, it looks like it's recommending I change the field recipe URL to a data role. For those of you that don't know, data role is a way to tell Prep Builder a little bit more about your data, give some metadata back. And basically in this case, when I specify a data role, I'm telling Prep Builder that all the values in that field should match a URL format. Other data roles are for like city or state. If it finds a state that doesn't exist, it will flag it for you to do something about. And you can filter it out or you can change the value. So if I click on this recommendation, it's going to tell me what's happening. It found a lot of valid values, but it actually found an invalid value. I'm going to apply that. And it did flag the invalid value. And instead of filtering it out, I'm just going to edit it directly and fix it. ://www. And it should be fixed. All right, one cool thing that Prep Builder does is we have built in some fuzzy clustering algorithms to group and replace values in fields. So if we look at this recipe type field, I have appetizers, that makes sense, main course, good. But it looks like there's some mismatch between side dishes and sides, starter and starters. I want those to be just one category, not like 2 separate misspelled categories or something. I could just select them and manually group them, or I could use this cool feature, especially if you have a lot of values and don't want to scroll down a long list, to group and replace. And I'm going to use the drop-down menu I talked about before. Go to group and replace, and I'm going to pick pronunciation. So it starts off with a slider that allows you to adjust how coarse or fine your clustering algorithm is. By default, it looks like it grouped starters with starter and starters into this bin, but I still want to group side dishes and sides. So I'm going to adjust the grouping a little bit, see what happens. Looks like nothing happened. What about all the way? It looks like it grouped something, but it grouped way too much. Starter and starters and side dishes are now in side dishes. That's not right. This is another gotcha. The fuzzy clustering algorithm is good, but it's not perfect. Always have a feel for whether the grouping is doing what you want. I recommend grouping as much as is correct and then manually grouping the remaining cases. So I'm just going to select side and side dishes, select group values. Boom. And now that's fixed. Okay, so if you remember my story from before, I kind of got tangled up in the last time I tried to make Thanksgiving dinner, and so I kind of want to pick some easier recipes. I looked at complexity, but another good kind of metric for how hard a recipe is cook time. And so what if I just sort by cook time and figure out, get rid of the really long recipes? I want to do that, but I can't just sort. I mean, I could, but these are all strings, and so the ordering would be kind of weird. Instead, I'm actually going to separate out the hours and minutes from this cook time field, and then create a calculated expression to convert that to just minutes and sort on that. I'm going to do that by clicking the drop-down menu, automatically splitting, seeing what comes out. So it looks like I have two fields. And I kind of think that they're hours and minutes, but let's make sure. So if I click on this cook time of 0 hours and 22 minutes, it looks like it corresponds to 0 in the first column and 22 in the second. If I pick another one, let's say 2 hours, 2 minutes, looks like 2 and 2, 2 hours 14, 2 and 14. Looks good. I'm going to rename this column to hours, rename this column to minutes. Oops. And I'm going to change the data type to numbers on both. Now I'm going to create a calculated field. I could do that either by clicking this option up here in this bar, or picking one of the fields and just selecting Create Calculated Field. Calculation should be hours times 60 plus minutes. I'm going to call it total cook time minutes. Apply it. Now I don't need these fields anymore. I'm going to remove them. Now I look at this cook time in minutes and I see a weird distribution. It looks like there's one value with 1,205 minutes. And the time I have the original value is 20 hours and 5 minutes for Brussels sprouts. Given that this is Brussels sprouts, I feel pretty okay about just excluding this. Oh well. And now that I've excluded the outlier, the remaining values seem much more reasonable. Looks like the longest recipes are sweet potato casserole, butter for some reason, and stuffed mushrooms. Cool. All right, so I've made a lot of changes. How do I keep track of everything I've done? Well, I've got the changes pane, but what if I save this and open it, I don't know, the day before Thanksgiving? Or what if I hand this off to someone who doesn't know the flow? Two things that are useful for helping you pick up where you left off are you can add descriptions to individual steps and also changes. So I'm going to make a note here, a description, and say I removed peanuts and calculated total time in minutes. And then I'm also going to annotate the description of where I calculated total time here. Calculated total time in minutes. All right. And real quick, you're also able to rename each step. So I'm going to rename the input step as all meal recipes, and the cleaning step as cleaned recipes. So we covered splits to calculate the total cook time. We removed some columns we didn't need. We calculated the total cook time. We used that cool group and replace fuzzy clustering. And the gotchas, adding descriptions can be really helpful for picking up later, especially when you have a complex flow. And grouping fields might not work perfectly. Always double check what's been grouped. All right, integrating, joins and unions. If you use Tableau, you've probably encountered some of those. For unions, what happens is if you have two data source inputs that are really similar, ideally they have exactly the same fields and exactly the same data types, you're just appending the values from one of those data sources or tables to the other, just so you can have one centralized data source. And that means for us that I haven't forgotten about the dessert recipes. So I'm going to bring those in just like I brought in the meal recipes. maybe. Ah, cool. And then also apply the same regular expression. Cool. Cool. And so, if you remember, we did the cleaning step, and I kind of don't want to do that all over again. Instead, what I'm going to do is union this to all the meal recipes, and then rewire my flow to just clean the unioned output. So I'm going to call this all desserts. And then in Prep Builder, you can union or create new steps either by clicking this plus sign next to the step you want to create a step after. And you'll see we could create a cleaning step, an aggregate, pivot, join, union, a script, which is a 201, Tableau Prep 201 level topic, or an output. Also, and my preference is you can just drag and drop. So if I select this step, I drag it onto the meals. There's a union and a join drop target. I'm going to put it over union. The union's created. So one gotcha with unions is it's great if they have all the same fields, but life's not always great. So really what you want to see is where the fields don't match between the two or the multiple inputs of the union. And Tableau Prep offers an easy way to do that with this option right here, show only mismatched fields. If I click on that, I can see what's going on. It looks like in the meal recipes, I have food class and wine pairing. In the dessert recipes, I have dessert class and sweet score. I kind of know that food class and dessert class are the same thing, so I'm going to merge them. I'm going to tell Tableau Prep or Prep Builder that those two are the same thing and just drag and drop one onto the other. I'm going to rename this real quick to recipe class and then just drag dessert class on top. Now they're no longer mismatched, so they don't show up. And I'm going to leave wine pairing and sweet score the way they are. They might be useful in my analysis later. Who knows? And that is a union step. The last file I want to bring in is the ratings for everything. I don't want to just go off of cook time. I also want to put good recipes. So I'm going to pick the last file. Here we go, ratings from 2010 to 2018. Oh, actually. Forgot to rewire the cleaning step. So in Prep Builder, you can kind of reshape your flow how you want just by dragging different steps around to wherever it makes sense to you. I'm just going to drag the cleaning step over here just after the union, remove this wiring, so right-click and remove, and then rewire it by dragging the union step onto the clean step. Now you're still excluding peanut recipes, you're still calculating total cook time, that's all good. And now I'm going to bring in the ratings and just join the ratings input to my clean recipes by dragging and dropping. So if you've never worked with joins before, joins are where you're trying to combine two different data sources with a set of common fields. So in this case, I have all my recipes with recipe titles and all my ratings, which are sorted by recipe titles, and I want to join on that field. Prep Builder sometimes tries to guess which field matches up, and so here it's tried to guess that the recipes in the ratings file matches the recipe URL in the all recipes. That's not quite what I want, so I'm going to change the match field to, or the match field or the join clause to recipe title. And it looks like I had 160, hello. I have a 4-year-old laptop. They told me to get a new one. So it looks like I had 167 recipes going in, and 167 recipes came out. But what's this mismatched part? The ratings I pulled were for all recipes, not just the Thanksgiving-related ones. So there's definitely going to be some rating values that aren't matched to my data that I brought in. So I guess the gotcha here is always make sure your join clause gives you the desired result. If you haven't really played around with joins, you can select different types of joins by toggling different parts of the join Venn diagram here and seeing what happens instantly in the summary pane to the right. Yep. As well as seeing kind of a summary right here on the left-hand side in the join pane. Cool. So, yep, if you have jagged unions, you should reconcile those using the show mismatch field option that we provide. And just be careful when you're joining two different data sources together to make sure you're getting what you expect. All right, this is the best stage of the presentation. Ooh, yep. Unions and joins. This is the best stage of the presentation. Last year I gave a talk with a co-speaker, my colleague Stephen McDonald, on how to aggregate friends and influence pivots. Aggregation should be pretty familiar if you've used Tableau, but pivots can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to kind of move at light speed here and give you a high-level description. But if you want to learn more about pivots and the nuances in performing pivots and what they're all about, come visit us in the Data Village. So to start with, aggregations, the actual quote by Stephen, aggregations are the gathering of data expressed in summary form, resulting in increased clarity through the reduction in level of detail. Cool. What does that mean? Let's say you had just a lot of data, a lot of rows, and you wanted a quick summary of what's going on in this table. So aggregations are calculations you can apply to each field to just summarize them in specific ways. So I've grouped the regions, I've counted the distinct sellers, I've counted the number of sales IDs, and I've summed the total sales amount. And this basically boils down to that tall table with a lot of rows, just showing me that in the North region I had 3 sellers, 4 sales, and $430 in sales. So it's just kind of condensing the information. You lose some detail, but it provides you a quick summary. Pivots. A pivot by any other name would be functionally equivalent. In Tableau for a while, what we would call pivots, other software would call an unpivot, a meld, a merge, and a few other names. And so there was kind of some ambiguity about what was what. More recently, we've clarified that by calling pivots row to column transformation and unpivots columns to rows. So there's no ambiguity, but this quote's still awesome. Pivots are a way of reshaping your data. The really high-level explanation is if you have a short and wide data set, so a data set with a lot of columns and not too many rows, and you want to restructure it to having a few columns but many rows for the purposes of some analyses, you perform a pivot. That's totally not all there is to pivoting, but that's a very short description of it. So if I had this data set, which again is sales by region over multiple years, I would pivot it and it would change the shape without losing any information. I'm going to show you an animation that does not actually exist in the product, and I'm required to tell you that, but I had a UI friend of mine cook it up so you could see kind of how the data reorganizes when you perform a pivot. So watch as the same data changes from columns to rows. I drag the years into the pivot column, and I'll do it one more time because it's awesome. So I drag the fields I want to pivot in, and the data is reshaped from tall and wide, or from short and wide to tall and yeah. Cool. And let's actually do that on my data set. So the ratings that I brought in, there's ratings for 9 different years, and I want to have a ratings value to do my data analysis of my recipes by, and I just want one number. I don't want to have to go through all of these. I could just use the latest year, but I do want to fold all of the information in. I could create a really long calculated expression that says this plus this divided by everything, just find the average. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot my data and then perform an aggregation on it to get the average rating number over all the years. So I'm going to add a pivot to the ratings input by clicking here and selecting pivot. I'm going to select all the ratings fields. Prep Builder automatically detects there's a common naming for all these fields and uses that as the column title of the pivot values. For the pivot names, I'm going to say rating year. Cool. And now I have pivoted these values. So now all the values for each year are in one field, and the associated rating year is in another. And now I'm going to aggregate this by creating an aggregate step. And I'm just going to bring in the recipe title and the rating year. So you could either double click to add it to the aggregation or drag and drop. Oops, that's not what I want. I meant actual rating. And instead of summing all these, I want to average them. All right, awesome.
Tableau, like you had like 3 different numbers in a single cell. For Tableau, when you pivoted, did it automatically recognize all 3 in each cell and then average?
Oh, were there 3 in different cells?
Yeah, they were originally was. That's what I was like.
So, yeah, let's see. I'll have to talk to you after, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious how it did it. It looks like it did do that. I was just
Cool. Yeah,
that's standard.
Yeah, it definitely. I'm pretty sure it did the right thing. Oh, I hope so. Pretty sure. So we have successfully averaged all these ratings per all the recipes, and I'm just going to rewire instead of directly joining to join to this new aggregated rating. And make sure I'm joining on the right thing, recipe title to recipe, that looks good. And now I have a rating for each recipe. Awesome. All right, so we covered at light speed, aggregates and pivots. Some gotchas, your aggregate numbers don't match what you expect. Sometimes you pick the wrong aggregation calculation. It's important to know kind of what you want. I'd assume everyone kind of has a feel for what average, and some do, but there's other aggregations that are a little bit trickier. So be aware of your aggregation calculations. And then pivots, transfer between columns and rows and columns. Make sure you're pivoting in the right direction. Pivots are interesting. All right, final stage, sharing your data. So the final step is outputting your data outputting your data where people can see it. So we offer a few options. You can output to CSV. You can output to Tableau data extract, which are the old type of Tableau extracts, or the new hyper extract, which is much faster and optimized for Tableau, as well as the TDE. Or you can publish as a data source to your server in case you want to share your recipe analysis. Cool. I'm just going to save it locally, and to actually output it to the specified location, I can just run flow, and it will generate all the rows for all the recipes, actually process the data, and spit it out in the C drive/data sources location. You also have the option to publish your flow if you want. Now that's not Prep Builder, that's Prep Conductor. You can publish a flow that connects to data sources, and if your server has access to the databases you're connecting to, in the case of the databases, or if you've packaged the files up when you publish the flow, you can schedule the flow to run regularly, so the data source that you output is always containing the freshest data. That's pretty cool. To learn more about that, come and see us in the Data Village. And that is sharing your data. Almost. Hey. Also, I believe in Devs on Stage today, they talked about writing to the database, which is a thing. I don't fully know the parameters of that, but that will be coming out soon. Today we covered all these recipes. So turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Take note, pumpkin pie is the best. But really we covered exploring your data, so searching for turkey recipes, excluding outliers that don't belong in your data and reconciling them, removing columns, calculating the total cook time and sorting by that, data roles. So if you remember, I assigned a data role to the URL and found one that wasn't quite right, unioning the desserts in the recipes, joining the ratings in, pivoting and aggregating to get one rating number, and then exporting. Some resources for y'all. Come visit us in the Data Village. We're there. I'll be there tomorrow. So yeah, come say hi. Related talks. I'm pretty sure all these talks have already taken place, but I believe they were recorded and they're always posted online after the conference. If you want to try this out right away, there's a link right here to just download a trial version and get started, as well as some online resources. My colleague Ariel is the primary person who works on these help resources, and I shamelessly stole a lot of content from those. Please, if you have a second, kind of look in your app and rate this session. I love getting ratings back, and let me know how I'm doing, what I can improve on, all that stuff. Let me know what went well, or so I can give a good talk next year, or if you don't want me to come back next year, let me know, I guess. This was my last session, so I'll miss you. And here are the related sessions, which are already over.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.